Hello and welcome to the Trail and Adventure Motorbike Podcast with me, Clive Barber, and my good mate, Noel Tom. For the days when you can't ride your bike, there's always the Trail and Adventure Motorbike Podcast. In this week's exciting episode, there's going to be a massive fight between me and Noel and a couple of big bike wankers. Actually, they're probably quite a bit younger than us. They're probably going to win easy. And I think they've both got military experience, so we're fairly knackered. But we're going to have a massive row about big bikes versus small bikes. So please join me in welcoming the legend, the YouTube sensation that needs no introduction. That is Ollie Moto. If you don't know who Ollie is, you need to go back to Season 3, Episode 2. Listen to that, and he'll tell you who he is at great length. And we're also joined by Instagram photography sensation, that is Jason, better known as HP2MAV. Mav's not his real name. I hope you're all well prepared like me.
Yeah, I've done loads. This is my prep, loads of prep.
Yeah, that's it. I made it here on time, unlike others. I mean, that's the real prep, right?
Mav, I don't think there's any prep we need to do. I mean, it's
a foregone conclusion.
Yeah,
it's not even really a debate.
Basically, these two are going to say, our little bikes are really cool. We're just going to go, shut up.
I spoke to Jason yesterday and he's got loads of quite clever things to push us back with. So, Ollie, there's no point in you introducing yourself because you were in Season 3, Episode 2, and you talked about yourself, which you clearly love doing at great length, without a camera into your own face.
I don't know where to go from that. You talk about me in every single episode anyway.
We love talking about you in every single episode.
Yeah, I know. And I'm such a big deal. Many leather-bound books.
But I didn't hear, Ollie. I'm sorry, I've not heard your podcast, so I don't know how to compare with the intro.
Mav, we're on the same team. You're supposed to at least pretend you've listened to it.
Well, but that I get caught out. I'm not very good at lying.
It's all right. Clive will edit this bit out, and then you can say, "Yeah, I've listened to it, Ollie. It's really good."
Oh no, we won't. We're also joined by Jason, better known as HP2MAV on Instagram. So, first question for Jason. HP2MAV, is that your real name?
Mav is an old nickname, which I'm not going to divulge the background of with that beer. So next time we see you in person, we can talk about where the background of that. And Mav was, of course, taken on Instagram. So the HP2 was obviously not. So HP2MAV.
Funnily enough, I thought, he's just taken his registration number and given himself that name on Instagram. So when people actually call you Mav, it's legitimate because it is a proper nickname. And you've got an HP2 motorcycle.
It seems so.
Yeah. These two are the big bike wankers I referred to earlier. So we're going to have a massive row now and finally, once and for all, decide which bikes are best, big bikes or small bikes. So you're either on Austin Vince and our side or Ollie and Jason and Ewan and Charlie's side.
Oh, you sneaky bastard.
I was hoping before we started that we'd get Jason to tell us a bit more about Jason, because for years and years, I've been trying to work out what the hell Jason does. And from my online sort of research, all I can decipher is that he's actually a trained assassin, ex-military, but that's his actual day job, assassin. But he sort of hides that behind sort of being having some kind of internet presence as a big biker. Does a little bit of work for Moto and pretends to represent them in Europe. But essentially, he kills people without leaving a mark.
Have you got a question, Noel?
What, how is Jason?
Great.
He's so mysterious. He's everywhere. I see him all over the internet all the time. Everyone knows him.
He's literally come on a podcast to answer fucking questions.
Oh, okay,
Ask
great.
a question and let him answer
it. Jason, could you, if I want someone taking out, are you the man to contact?
Not that one.
I could tell you, but I'd have to kill you.
So far, you've asked Mav, is his name based on his registration? And can he kill a guy for you?
Yeah, no wonder we're back down to the fourth most popular podcast in the UK. Jason, who are you? What's in the garage? Where do you ride and what type of riding do you do?
I've been riding a little over 10 years, so I was a late starter, although I did have a DT50 when I was 16 for a year.
That counts. Nice small bike.
But then I grew out of that because obviously I became an adult.
Shots fired.
and on target, it seems. I did the classic, got divorced, and thought I really should get back into bikes, and did my direct access with BMW when they shared their direct access school with Off-Road Skills in Wales. And I did my direct access by riding around Brecon Beacons with an instructor, which was awesome. And fully drank the Kool-Aid. My dad, stepfather, I should say, he used to ride BMWs as well. So I was kind of fully in the fold, bought a 650 Dakar. In fact, while I was overseas, just called the dealer and literally bought my kit in the States, landed at the airport and got a taxi to the garage, and then rode the bike back from the garage. And that 650, I thought, I'll buy it, see how I do. And if it doesn't work out too much, I'll sell it and not lose too much money. I think I did 13,000 miles on that little 650 in the first year and realized this isn't very smart in terms of like commuting and whatever. So I looked for a twin, looking at the GS, and an HP2 before they were popular was going cheap. So I got my HP2 with all the toys and all the trimmings and extra wheels for $8,000. And that became my first proper bike. And that's how I learned to ride off-road. That's how I learned to commute and tour. I did 2-up touring on it. I used to commute on the Supermoto rims during the week and then throw the dirt wheels on at the weekend and go throw it down Welsh mountainsides. And that's where the addiction really kind of kicked in. I think I've probably done maybe a couple 100,000 miles on boxes in the 12, 15 years.
Is it still the same HP2 now that you have now?
Yeah. I haven't done a couple 100,000 miles on that bike, but I've done, that is the same HP2. Yep. So
Wow.
That's basically my first kind of real bike. That's probably got, I think only about 60, 70,000 miles on it, because again, did a lot of miles that in the first year. I toured down to south of France on it, 2-up, even used to have hard boxes on it. And I realized the bike was really quite special. And so I decided to get a GSA, again, technically a high mileage one, but it was going cheap. So I got the GSA for commuting, and I commute year round on the GS. And then HP has now become purely for dirt work, really. I've always had GS alongside the HP. So I have the HP, got the GS. I've still got the old 650. It's in the garage. It's been lent out to different people who then learned to ride on it. So I've given it long-term loans. So one guy had it for 2 years and learned to ride on it. Now my brother's got it. So I don't, technically, I half own it. I call it, when I count my number of bikes, it's half a bike. I legally own it, but people borrow it. And then I've got a 500. So we'll talk about that. A small bike, a KTM 500. And I've got an old Airhead Scrambler thing in the back of the garage as well.
Is that a BM R something?
It's a BM, yeah, R100. It was an RT. It's been kind of hacked about a bit. Put some GS bars on it, some knobbly tyres on it. Nice custom 2-in-1 exhaust and a simple seat on it. It's a good bit of fun.
Well, I was going to say, what's that like to ride off-road?
Fun. The alloy wheels, though, tend to dent. I've discovered that you can't hit things too hard, but it's the R100, so it's got so much torque. And it's got the twin discs up front, so it does actually stop. Suspension is terrible once you get a bit of pace on it.
It's a twin shock.
Monoshock.
Right.
Yeah, it's like 1988, I think, or something.
This is all just for my own benefit, because I've just been looking at our BMW R series bikes recently. Just wonder about which one to go for, if I go for one at all.
I'm bitten by I've drunk the Kool-Aid, the Boxer engine I find amazing to ride. Even on the big ones, even on the GSAs. So the GS, I've loved the GSAs as well. So literally that's the bike I've done the most miles on. I've done one trip, we did 4,000 miles, 2-up in 8 days. And literally a big figure of 8, down through Bordeaux, and then Barcelona, Seville, back up through Madrid, and then across to the east of France and back up. 8 days. Did 285 miles of that, even getting off the back at one point. Used to have like a Camelback with a big long tube that both of us could drink out of, and a tub of dried fruit and a tub of Haribo, and she would just keep feeding me, and I would just keep going. And that, you can't do that on a small bike, can you?
No, you can, but you just, why the fuck would you?
No. So that's the bikes, that's the garage.
Yeah.
The Instagram thing, I don't want to give a shout out for it, because social media gets a lot of bad rep, because certain other domains, it does feed the narcissist in us all, but I've met some amazing people through it.
You have a really big Instagram following, don't you?
I wouldn't say really big. I have some following.
Nearly 10,000, which is pretty big.
10,000? Yeah. How do you do that?
He takes pictures and he puts them on there, and people find him and look at his pictures and that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
It helps having the HP, because that's a special bike.
Well, do you know how many HP2s there are in the UK?
I know in the world, I think they only made 2,000. They only ran it for like one run back in 2005, 2006.
People thought it was nuts, didn't they, when it came out?
I've spoken to a few journalists, actually. I've met a few over the years, and they said that part of the reason why it was such a failure was because in those days, journalists weren't able to ride off-road. They were all riding RTs or CBRs or whatever. You give them an HP2 and they're like, well, this makes no sense to me, because they're just riding it on the roads. And it's like, I've got no ABS. It's on knobbly tires. It's got big tall suspension. I can't reach the ground. It's a stupid machine. You know, when the alternative is an R1200 GS for, I think, less money.
Where do you do most of your off-road riding?
We'll do a mix of riding. I've toured most of Western Europe, France, Spain, Italy, Switzerland. This is all the touring riding. I commute. Before lockdown, used to do a lot of miles, and again year round. And then trail riding, a lot of Wales, a lot of the plain, a lot of the Tet, that kind of riding. I guess I should admit I've done the Erzberg a couple of times on the HP. Just the prologue. Done a little bit of racing, not much. Trying to get into that too.
Ollie, just remind everybody what bikes you've got.
What I've got in my garage a KTM 990 Adventure S, the bat bike. I have a CBR 600 RR track bike. And then when I'm feeling like a child, I have a little Husky 350.
They've both got small bikes, really, haven't they? Small enduro bikes. Small, light, nimble.
I would say a 500 doesn't really count compared to some of the children's bikes we're talking about.
That was a bit harsh. That Husky 350 is a good bike. It is a good bike. But I'm here to say that all small bikes are shit. So for the purpose of this podcast...
I don't think you're here to say small bikes are shit. I think you're here to say big bikes are better and why they're better and why you enjoy them more.
I had no idea, Clive, you're a diplomat.
I know.
I'm not, because what we're going to then do is go, now, they're wrong, and I'm going to edit all your good stuff out.
Well, I was just about to say he's not dropped the C-bomb yet, but there we go. We've got it. 20 minutes.
We did a bit of TAMP bullshit bingo at the Lightweight Adventurers Festival. I didn't know what people would think of it, but yeah, it was Clive drops the C-bomb, Clive swears, Clive insults Noel, Clive insults the audience, Clive insults the guests, Clive insults the listeners. We did quite well on most of those.
Yeah, it worked well.
It did.
That's why you're the fourth best, third best, second best.
Third most loserish motorcycle podcast, but we keep leaving gaps between doing them and everybody else does them. That's the only reason. Apparently the other factor in there is its number of download, number of new listeners, but they also factor in the amount of time people listen for. You know, you get 1 million people going and listen to 2 seconds, it doesn't really count, and they do that because of these, you know, farms where people will, you know, you can pay somebody to go and listen to your podcast 1 million times, but if they only listen to it for 2 seconds, it don't count.
Do you see stats of how long people listen to this nonsense for?
Yes.
And do a lot of people not make it to the end?
Why are you smiling when you say that? This is your podcast.
It's just so funny, isn't it, that you would start listening to it and think, nah, it's not for me.
We actually get a very good percentage. So we're around the 70-80% for most of them. But if you think of the way you consume a podcast, so you'll listen to something for 20 minutes, then you'll pause it and then you'll go, you know, get in the car and then listen to the rest of it in the car.
I'm a bit obsessed with the Adam Buxton podcast, and I was listening to that today, and he does a really funny sort of ramble at the end of it. And he said that his stats show him that only a quarter of his listeners listen to the whole thing. I found that amazing.
So I just wanted to come back to something Jason said about social media not always being a bad thing. We actually kind of all met through an online community. Greg got us all together to go to the FOMO festival. Gregfest, as nobody calls it.
Yeah.
So that's a positive thing.
I think social media is totally positive. There are elements that are bad about it, and it can feed the narcissist and whatever. I think particularly in the dirt biking community as well. It's an awesome community. I get so little trolling on my account. I mean, I've got a reasonable degree of engagement, apparently. I think I've had 2 trolling comments I can think of.
You do YA grips?
No, that's
It's
still
going.
Yeah. I still get a couple of weeks saying, this is bullshit. Why are you wiring the grips? And I normally now just send them a picture of like a Moto 2 bike that's got its grips wired, or a TT bike that's got its grips wired, or...
I bet you even thought, should I even post this? Like, when you originally did it, and yet it's gone nuts.
Somebody actually said, surely this is a wind-up. That's what their comment was. People got really aggy that I didn't cut them neatly at the end. And I said to all of them, you put a bar grip in, you can't even see it. What does it matter? But hey, it keeps me entertained. It makes me chuckle when I'm having a poo in the morning checking Instagram.
We don't get negative feedback, and one could argue that we deserve it, but we pretty much don't get any. It's generally very positive. And again, I think that point about the dirt bike community, again, back to the festival at the weekend, it was lovely. You could just talk to anybody and everybody, and everybody was your new mate straight away. It was lovely.
Yeah. And I think we're doing this stuff with Moscow. I get to meet quite a few people, and it's quite interesting doing things like the NEC bike show and the London bike show compared to doing things like ABR, and the ratio of people that are just more fun to talk to is definitely higher at those kind of events.
How did that come about, Jason, your involvement with Moscow?
Before they had a European distribution center, Rule, when you meet him, his name is spelled Roel, and no one knows how to say his name. But just think of it as Rule, like ruler, Rule. Yeah. He is, and has always been Moscow, Europe. And when they were first doing their first show, which was the Overland event in Oxford, which I would recommend. It's a great event for genuine, legit travelers. So a really good event. I don't know if you've been to it. But they wanted to exhibit, but their luggage had literally got held up in customs. And so they pinged me on Instagram and said, no, I bought some. And I'd been chatting to a couple over the previous months and said, hey, we know you've got some Moscow luggage. Would you be so kind as to lend it to us for the weekend? And I went to meet them at Overland. And now basically, I don't work for them. I'm not a sponsored rider. I'm just basically someone who helps them out with basically someone who'll loan their bikes. And I like to use their gear. I bought a big chunk of it myself. I spent a small fortune with them. Now I just help out on the stand because I like talking to people and I know a little bit about their gear, and they're just a really, really cool bunch of people.
And your bike looks great on the stand too, doesn't it?
I like to think so.
Yeah.
Although for the next event that we're doing at Overland again, the HP's been relegated. She's very upset. People don't want me, they just want my bike. If you look at my Instagram account, I'll send you the engagement. Yeah. It's all about pictures of the bike. I now know what women feel like about being objectified. I've been objectified for my bike.
I have a small following on Instagram, and I find that with a lot of foreign followers, like South American and a lot of European followers, and you should show anything other than a motorcycle, anything about just my life, nothing, no reaction at all. And then stick a picture of the bike on again, goes slightly mad. But
imagine if it was a big bike.
No way. Exactly, yeah, it'd be times 10 what it is now.
The HP2 community is pretty awesome. But there are bikes today that are technically way more capable. An 890R is a more capable bike. Yeah. And I've ridden them, and it's an amazing bike.
Has the value of it sort of rocketed since you bought it, or is it just stayed?
Yeah, it's great. The value is that I saw one advertised for 18k.
Wow! Someone will buy it at that.
One just actually sold for 18k. Yeah, doing the day with Cy Pavey, BMW used to do an experience day where basically you turn up in the morning at the BMW school. They'd have all the bikes on Supermoto rims. Then Cy Pavey would take you riding around the Brecon roads first, get a cup of tea or whatever, and then go back to the off-road park, and they change the wheels in front of you to show how easy it was to do it, and change all 6 bikes, and then you go riding around Walters Arena, which I don't know if you've ridden around there. It's an amazing place to ride. It's a 4,000-acre park that they've got to play in, and this is with Cy Pavey. I don't know if you know, legend of a guy. Mm-hmm. And when we finished, because he loves riding the HP2, he owned one for quite a few years. The other customers, you meet up with the rest of the school, and he's like, right. He's like, I've still got energy, so if anyone wants to keep riding, we'll carry on if you like. And the other customers were like, no, I'm a bit tired, I'm going to go back. And I'm like, wait, what? I've got a chance to go and play in 4,000 acres with Cy Pavey for a private ride around? I'm going. I don't know what I'm doing. And I was so unqualified and inexperienced at the time, but even to this day, Cy talks to me about it as well. Like, that was such a good day we had. We literally had another couple of hours, just the 4 of us. Him, his mechanic, Scotty, Nicky from Touratech Austria, and me. I think I'd been riding for like a year at the time. I was so out of my depth. How I didn't die, I have no idea.
Especially on that big bike. So, so listen.
My worst accident was on a small bike. My biggest bruise and hematoma was on a KTM 525.
Mine was on a bloody mountain bike, but that's another story.
Well, there you go. See, the smaller it is, the more dangerous it is.
You need more power. If you could have throttled out of that, you would have been fine.
Let's get back to big bikes. You've both got big bikes, but you've also got the enduro bikes. But what is it? And I think you both prefer riding your big bikes. What is it about the big bikes that you prefer?
You go first, Matt, because you'll give a really professional answer, and I've just said something stupid.
There's a few things. One is most of the UK involves some riding to get there and connecting the roads up. And a big bike, with a bit more power. Because one of the other podcasts I did listen to was the Perfect Tech Bike. And hearing Will talk about his 690, that extra bit of power and extra bit of weight just makes it so much more comfortable and enjoyable on the road. And so with a bigger bike, the road connection work is great. So it means I can go right down to the plain and do 50 miles to get there. And it's a fun ride to get there. It's not a slog. The road riding is the one. The other is most of the trails in the UK, most is up for debate, are really quite doable. They're just not a challenge in particular on a small bike. There are bits that are super challenging, even on a small bike. But they're quite few and far between, especially on the legal trails. So taking a big bike around adds some more challenge. Me and Ed, Biker Ed, big shout out to him. Actually, it's his birthday today as well. So
happy birthday, Biker Ed.
Happy birthday, Ed.
We did basically rode up to the northwest part of where the Tet starts in Wales and did all of that round to Barmouth and Lanny on the big bikes. And there was some sketchy moments, but it feels like more of a challenge. And so there is a sense of achievement to get a big bike around those kind of things. So those would be the two biggest reasons. And of course, the other one being I'm an adult, so I should be riding an adult's bike.
So what about you, Ollie? What do you get out of it?
Basically what Mav said, I have to ride 40 minutes to the nearest trail. So even just doing that on the little bike's just a nightmare. It's a pain in the ass. But I find, so I've had a load of little bikes, and I find that when I ride them, I feel like I'm sat on a bike. Whereas when I get on my 990, I feel like I'm at one, without sounding too namby-pamby, but I feel like I'm at one with my motorcycle, and I can feel what the bike's doing a lot more, and I can tell when the back's slipping, and I don't know, I just get a lot more feel for it. And like Mav said, you can do nearly any trail on a big bike. Let's caveat that. So there's going to be people listening to this, no, there's a trail near me, you'd never get a big bike up it. But what I'd say is go and stand on the main stage at ABR, have a look at the audience, and tell me how many people in the adventure bike scene actually take their bikes up nails trails. They don't, do they? We all ride on, like every now and again we might do a really difficult trail, but we all ride on pretty accessible trails most of the time. And I just prefer being on my big bike. I can eat up miles on it. I can take all my camping gear, and I know you can do that on the little bike, but I can have a lot more gear on my big bike and go on big adventures. And then you get off it and you feel like a hero at the end, don't you? You've got your big, loud, big bike, and you've just tackled a trail that on a little bike would be a non-event, but on a big bike, you're like, yeah, I've just achieved something there.
When you are riding quite a tricky track, or if you're riding a rutted track, are you not constantly in fear of this huge weighty thing dropping on you in some way? And do you have a sort of a policy of, if it does start to go, you just jump off it?
No, I'm not in fear. You probably, let's say you're riding a big rut. For me personally, I'll ride quicker on my little bike than I will on a big bike in a rut. But going fast in a rut on a small bike, it doesn't really appeal to me too much. The weight carries quite well. Like I did that trip in Morocco, didn't I? And I rode a GS, having never ridden one before, and they're big, heavy bikes. And I took it through the dunes in the Sahara, and up loads of rocky passes and stuff. I mean, it was an epic trip, Mav. You'd love it. These guys on little bikes can handle it. But yeah, on that bike, you wouldn't even know. Once you've got moving, you wouldn't know. It carried its weight really well.
I know that. I mean, you said that. I hear that all the time about big bikes. That when they're moving, the weight sort of disappears. But I bought an Africa Twin once, and I was immediately struck. by two things: how comfortable it was to ride off road.
Yep.
But also just that it was such a weighty thing, and when things did start to go wrong, I was really probably just going to have to let it go and get away from it probably as quickly as possible.
I think you're right. There is definitely, like, I've only had a small bike for the last couple of years. And it is true that it's highlighted to me how much you are aware. Especially, I do quite a lot of riding on my own as well. I know you're not supposed to, but I do. And you are aware of that. Like, okay, if I end up going down that route and I get properly stuck, 200 kilos of motorcycle is a challenge to manhandle, especially turn around in some stupid ruts. But I think that is then part of what focuses the mind, right? Like it's like the assault courses that Ollie's probably done. You put a plank on the ground, you can run along that plank at full speed, but you put that plank 30 feet in the air and it focuses the mind. It's still the same plank and it's still the same thing to run on, but that's the challenge, and that's part of what makes it exciting. It is that sense of achievement that you can be like, yep, I could have easily done this on a small bike, but that wouldn't be half the challenge. So I think that is part of why, because if you don't small bike, it wouldn't have the same challenge.
At the Lightweight Adventurers Festival, I'm not going on about this, but the first lane was a relatively steep, short, rocky lane. And bearing in mind, it's the Lightweight Adventurers Festival, there was a massive amount of people falling off, getting halfway up, turning round, giving up on the ride out for the day. The point that you say most lanes in the UK are quite easy, they are for some people, they're not for everybody. Some people really struggled on them.
You're completely right. It depends on your ability. So if you're not too comfortable off-road, then maybe jumping on a 200-kilo bike might not be too wise. But, mate, you could relate that to the ABR festival, so that muddy bog climb. Well, I went up there I fell off once, which I caught on camera, but I went up there 3 times without any issues on my KTM, and nearly every time I went past a little enduro bike on its side, upside down, and I was on a 990. So it just depends on what you're used to, I suppose, isn't it?
And Greg and I did have to pull a scooter out of that. So there you go.
But if you follow your point, though, Clive, even on the small bikes, they couldn't do it. So the issue there probably wasn't about the weight of the bike. And I don't mean to be disparaging to those people who are riding it. Getting any kind of bike up a loose, rocky trail is about momentum and carrying pace and make sure you build the power before you get onto it. Clutch control, so you don't end up spinning halfway up. All those problems are the same problem on a small bike and a big bike. And if they couldn't get up on a small bike, I think you've just kind of answered your own question.
Have either of you ever had to sort of leave your bike and go back with help to recover it?
They're not going to admit to it if they have.
I've had one AA recovery, but that was a stock throttle body, and that was on the road ride home.
But I just mean in terms of it being stuck where you physically couldn't get it out of that situation.
Stuck in a bog or upside down a cliff.
Given that it's Ed's birthday, we can embarrass Ed.
Yeah, let's do that.
We got his Triumph stuck in the lane, I forget what it's called, but it's one of the famous lanes in Wales, drowned it. We couldn't even get it out of the bog. I had to tow it out with the HP, and even then, the HP with all its torque really struggled. I had to really work hard, and he only admitted to me 2 weeks later that the reason why I couldn't pull it out of the bog was because he left it in gear. He drowned that bike, and that was a 2-hour job to take that bike apart, get the crash bars off, get the panels off, get the fuel tank off to get to the throttle bodies and get the water out the cylinders. On a 350, that would be a 20-minute job probably. We still fixed it though, and what an amazing story for him. He'll remember that. I remember that vividly.
Yeah. Everybody's going to remember that now.
It's what adventures are made of, isn't it? If you just pooted through on your 250, it would have been boring, wouldn't it? He won't even respond.
So one of your friends wants to start trail riding or adventure riding, and they come to you for bike advice. What bike are you going to tell them to get?
As you should always answer that question with a question, which is, if you're honest, what kind of riding are you really going to do? Everyone mocks the kind of adventure bike Chelsea tractor equivalent of you're buying an off-road bike, and are you really going to go trail riding? How much trail riding are you really going to do? And if your first bike, your first foray into riding is an awesome little a KTM 350 or 250, unless you live in the middle of deepest, darkest Wales and or have a great van and are prepared to go and do that investment, how much are you going to jump on and go and ride it? Whereas if you go and buy like a T7 or something, you're going to jump on it and go enjoy the road riding as well, and maybe hit a couple of trails. If you happen to be in the place where you can go do some awesome trails, because even like if you live in the middle of Salisbury Plain, I still wouldn't recommend that you or say that you need a 250, because all those trails, they're big fire trails. Most of them anyway. There is some sketchy chalk, but it depends. Like most people, I don't think actually would ride it that much if you told them to go and get a 250 4-stroke or something.
But then plenty of people travel the world on small bikes, and we've done trips into Europe on our 400s and 450s.
Only because you're going to do gnarly trails. You admit it yourself. You would not want to go ride 50 miles for fun on that. Road riding.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's unpleasant on a small bike. You're not going to want to go you don't want to go on the motor on anything really, but if you've got some miles to cover, motorways are good for doing that.
When I left you, Clive, in Spain on our TET trip in the spring, and I rode back all the way up through France, I was thinking for a lot of that trip, man, this would be great on a bigger bike. Yeah, really, I was, yeah. Just like when you just reminded me then, Jason, that, you sort of say about road riding, the road riding is great on a bigger bike. That's what I was missing out on a CRF 250 rally, was just the joy of accelerating into and out of corners a lot. And
I've literally got a friend who's right now literally just passed his Mod 1, and he's looking at bikes, and he wants to do the trail riding, but he also knows he wants to go and nip up to Scotland. You're not nipping up to Scotland on a 250 from Gloucestershire.
So what's he going to get?
His current favourite is either a T7 or a GS. You're shaking your head.
I'm nodding my head. I'm nodding
on
my
a
head.
podcast.
He's going to drown in a bog stuck under his bike that's too big for him.
Clive, in answer to your question, I was a sports bike rider, wasn't I? One of those dirty sports bike. Enough. Well, I've come back to that now. When you said what would be your first bike, well, I did exactly that. I went I needed an adventure bike, so I bought a Tiger 800, and I immediately took it to Morocco and rode it all the way around Morocco. You didn't have to get on a little bike straight away, do you? You can just jump on. But it's going to fit your adventure.
Morocco's relatively easy because it's piste. I know they can be rocky, but it is just piste generally through a desert. You're riding on.
Have you seen the video? We dragged it through. We rode through rivers. We the road disappeared, and we figured out our own route.
You just make it look difficult.
There might be a bit of editing talent in there, but yeah, no, it was. You couldn't do it by yourself. I couldn't have got it in there by myself, but I was with a group of people.
Yeah,
I had some miles to smash.
Yeah,
but then on the flip side, a friend of mine wanted to get into the adventure scene, and I recommended he got a CRF 300 based on what he wanted to do on it. So, like Matt said, it depends on what the rider wants to do.
I think you're right. It depends on what you want to do. It depends on where you live, and it depends on your skill level. And obviously your skill level will improve as you ride more. But so for us, We live in the Lake District. My first bike after a long layoff was an enduro bike because I wanted to ride the lanes in the Lake District. I genuinely think you would struggle, an average rider would struggle to get a big bike round some of the lanes in the Lake District.
Yeah. You see, I'm an amazing rider, and I would love to have...
It's true, he is.
He's incredibly modest as well.
He's a legend in his own mind.
I would love to have a big bike, but it wouldn't really get a lot of off-road use here because it would just be a nightmare, really, wouldn't it? Our lanes just aren't suited to it, really.
I've done quite a bit of the Peak District, and that's not the Lake District. The modern bikes are so freaking capable now. They're just phenomenal. My GS, I've just bought a new one because the last one got stolen. But the electronics, I don't even have to turn them off now. I can leave the ABS and traction control on, and it makes you feel like a riding god. I've got a picture of riding at a friend's place, roosting out of a corner, and you can see the pulses of the traction control as the roost is kicking up in pulses. It's that fast and that minute in terms of its control. It's just phenomenal.
You could get a big bike, kind of. It's just a fight. So it just depends. I've taken my big bike. I got it halfway through Happy Valley in Wales, and it was only halfway because the battery died and I needed to get it out. And that was in the middle of the night. You can do it. I've been back since on my 350 and thought, how the fuck did I get a 990 around here? But I did it. So
Well, Will had taken his GS 1200 up, hadn't he? I think
he had, yes. How does Happy Valley compare to Breast High or Gatesgarth?
I don't know those two trails.
No, they're quite hard. Yeah, they're hard. They're horrible. They're horrible trails.
Don't get me wrong. I think that's what I was trying to say earlier. There are clearly some spots that that are somewhere between incredibly hard and or impossible. You know, the Boxer has that width. There's a pretty fun lane coming out of Barmouth that's like up a narrow track, and it's rock strewn. And I'm glad I didn't think about it at the time because there was no way you turn that bike around in there. So if it got stuck, it would have been interesting in hindsight. And there's a width point. You know, it's like physical limits.
Sorry, mate. Is that the one that goes through the little wall? I think I've done that. Fair play doing that. Doing that on a big bike, fair play.
I get it. There are definitely lanes. You have to ask yourself, how often are you in those incredibly difficult lanes? I'd love to be, like, I've got friends who live in deep Starks Wales where they know where you can ride illegally but accepted by the locals and it's fine, sort of thing. And there are some fantastic trails. And I've had those on my doorstep. I'd even be on a 250. But my 500 I bought because I wanted to be able to get to the place as well.
I think, should we end the podcast here? Because I think we just won.
What? Why?
He said he's right. Get a small bike.
If you live in the middle of the most amazing lanes.
Caveat.
Yeah, we do.
Clive, you've got that big, horrible, ugly KTM that you've got. Isn't that kind of a big adventure bike?
Yeah, it is.
So why did you get that?
For touring on the roads and the occasional gravel track through the Pyrenees or something like that.
So what most people that listen to this, what sort of riding do they do? Do they go on adventures and do they do touring? So should they get a big bike? Is that what we're saying? Is that what we're saying? I don't know. I know the listeners can't. I know the listeners can't see your face, but Clive went to talk there and then realised he had nothing. Didn't say a word.
Legally, it's called being on the ropes.
The fact of the matter is, the four of us sitting here talking nonsense have all got multiple motorcycles, both large and small. So I guess the answer is multiple motorcycles.
It is
N+1. But what would be the one bike you keep?
So I'm going to step in there.
Yeah.
When's this podcast going out?
Probably a week on Monday.
I am doing the Dawn to Dusk Enduro this weekend on my little bike. And then after that, I'm probably selling my little bike because I never use it. And I'm keeping, so to answer Mav's question, in answer to the what one bike would you keep, my KTM 990.
Likewise, same HP.
And that's just me. That's just me. I'm not speaking on behalf of all adventure riders. I don't want to be that brash, But
with your kind of YouTube following, dude, I think you're pretty qualified to speak on behalf of all adventure riders.
So, okay, I've got some scenarios. What are you going to take, your big bike or your small bike?
I can just tell you now, the big bike.
Hey, I've got a number of different scenarios. So you're going on a European tour with potential for some gravel tracks through the Italian Alps.
I've done that. That's the hard Alpi tour. I've done that. Big bike.
No?
Well, I've got this dilemma coming up because I'm going away with my girlfriend, lady partner wife, in September. She's stuck with her little Honda 230. She's only got one bike. It's crazy. I have got several bikes. Now, I can do the fair thing where I also go away on a little Honda 250. Or I could go away on a still relatively small but bigger Honda 650, which I'll enjoy more, but I'll be, I don't know, it's wrong to say I'll have an advantage, but What do I do? Do I go away on the bigger bike or do I match her with the little bike? I
think-
want, to tie in with your question, Clive, I want to go away on the bigger bike.
Oh, can I ask your lady partner wife, how long you've been together a long time?
Yes.
I'll fuck her off, take the big bike.
She's got a history of forgiveness.
If it was a first date, then you want to, you need to
Yeah.
be nice.
Right. Excellent relationship advice. That's good.
Yeah, it's not an adventure. This isn't a relationship advice podcast, is it, Clive?
We don't do relationships.
No.
We don't do too many things either. Okay, scenario number 2. You're going trail riding with your mates on Salisbury Plain.
Big bike.
Don't just nod your head on a fucking podcast, Ollie.
Well, it's because I keep
You have to say
talking over
something.
people by accident because it's hard on this, isn't it? So I'm sort of putting my hand up to talk now like a child. Big bike. I have a big bike.
Noel.
You're asking I'm never having you as a defense lawyer. These are crazy questions. You're asking the wrong questions because these are all the answers. Or have you got some really clever twist at the end of
I've got
it?
some other ones later,
Right,
yeah.
yes.
Just answer
Well,
the
are
question.
you going to say
Salisbury-
later on, but you said earlier, I put it to you. Setting them up to contradict themselves later on. Brilliant. I love it. Big bike.
I'm going big bike European tour. I'm going small bike on Salisbury Plain.
What?
Well, have you
I'm
ever
going
been?
small
Have you
bike.
been to Salisbury Plain?
Of course, I've been to Salisbury Plain.
Well,
been everywhere. I've been doing
And
this
you
for
take a
years,
small
mate.
bike by
Yes.
choice. Which bit of
Right.
Salisbury Plain
Yeah.
did you go to?
The small bike area.
The small bike
No, I've never been to Salisbury Plain.
Excellent.
The clue's in the name.
Did you not see the awesome pictures we got of Ollie on the plane on his
Yeah, I
990?
saw them, yeah.
Yeah.
Got that when he did that jump that was about an
Yeah,
inch off the
the one
ground.
where he was
and
just about
like,
to lose
posting it.
control.
Ooh, look at me! I'm an inch off the. Oh no, I've fallen off into a hedge. and broke the shoulder.
I very nearly crashed. There was I properly lost the front, and I don't know how it stayed upright, but it did. It did because it's a big bike, and they carry the weight well.
Yeah,
all that
that's
sort of
Yeah.
blah blah blah. Everything we just said.
Yeah. Scenario 3. You're going trail riding with your mates in the Lake District.
Big bike.
Oh, you're an idiot. Ollie?
I've never been, but if I was to go up there, I would be going on the big bike.
Right, I challenge you both. We will start this online beef to come up to the Lake District.
What are we, rappers?
And we'll take you out. And we'll make... Yeah,
Don't be dissing me, man.
Yeah, got to develop hip-hop names and then we'll have a beef. The annoying thing is quite a few of the lanes in the lakes have actually been graded, so there's a lot. Some of them are quite smooth and actually...
Don't backtrack now.
Yeah.
You've just...
Right, we'll get you up. We'll get you up on the
Okay.
next Gatesgarth
Oh, God,
open day.
No.
Should we take him up there? Noel doesn't even like doing that
No,
on
I
his
wouldn't
trials
do that
bike,
on a
I'll be
small
honest.
bike.
Come on, big men. Come
Yeah,
on.
but no, see,
Come
you've
at me.
I mean, I'll happily give it a go, but you're skewing it now because we said right at the beginning that you pick your lanes, don't you? I don't.
I've picked some lanes for you. It's fine.
Right, fuck it, I'm in. Let's do it.
You'll make a good video
Yeah,
as well.
exactly.
I mean, I'll take the camera because you'll break your camera as well. But scenario number 4. You've entered the Rydale Rally.
Yep, done it on the HP2.
I've not done it, but if he's done it on the HP2, then I'll do it on the 990.
No, we've both done the Rydale Rally.
No, I haven't. Where's the Rydale Rally?
Yeah, me and you did
It's
it.
in,
Me and you did it.
it's in Rydale.
That's where we met
Well, the
Greg.
Kielder Rally is the Rydale Rally.
Oh, no, you're right. That's the Kielder Rally.
Idiot.
Excellent.
I've done the Rydale Rally as well.
What is the Rydale Rally? Where is it?
It's Yorkshire,
Yeah.
isn't it?
Right.
Yeah, it's a feral track
Yeah.
for us Southerners.
But is it quite tough or is it just forest track?
No, you can do it on a big bike.
Let's say the Kielder Rally. You've done the Kielder Rally.
I definitely do the Kielder on a big bike. Have you seen all the pictures? They're always big bikes.
Yeah.
They don't take pictures of the small bikes because why would you?
Go too slow. Yeah.
Yeah.
Last scenario. You're going on a 10-day Tet trip from Newcastle along the Tet down to South Wales. Which bike do you take?
Done it on the HP.
Again, wrong answer.
I take the big bike. Every time I've done a Tet trip, I've taken the big bike.
We're going to have to redo this podcast with people that aren't idiots, no.
But we don't want to offend your Tet because you're all quite Tetty. We don't want to offend the Tet people.
Yeah.
I know they always say it's designed with light bikes in mind. Yeah, mate, but you can also do it on a big bike. So
When you're riding your big bikes down trails, is there ever a point? I'm just thinking about, do you ever come across steps sometimes and think, damn, I wish I was on a lighter bike?
Yeah, let me rephrase it. I think this would be so much easier on a lighter bike. But I don't necessarily think I wish I was.
Right.
I think that's just part of the challenge. And there are some bits, like, to be honest, when we did we basically, like I said earlier, with where he got stuck. It makes me happy because he's normally the one that's helped me out. So the one time he does get stuck, I have to remind him of that. But anyway,
happy birthday.
Yeah.
Ed.
Yeah, happy birthday, Ed. Yeah, there are parts where it's like, yeah, that was really hard. And there are parts where you're just like, maybe I should turn around. But we did the Great Western Trail from all the way down to Land's End. We just did the south leg of it.
Yeah.
It's mega. And there are bits there where you're just like, But because you're on a big bike, if you want to cut it out and rejoin it, the road ride fun for the next bit is fine too.
Have you ever had to turn around, or has it hardly ever happened? Is that a very unusual thing?
I'm trying to think as well. I don't think I've ever turned around, but I think I've just bundled my way through it. It wasn't necessarily neat, and maybe I've had a few friends help me.
What about that time you bundled yourself into a hedge and broke your shoulder? Did you have to turn around then, or did you carry on riding that day?
I mean, I know you're giving me very witty banter, but actually I carried on riding for the whole day because I'm an idiot. So I'm not, as the medic in this conversation, if you break your shoulder, you should go home, people. Well, because I tick all the boxes of idiot, I'm a paramedic, a bloke, and an adventure rider. So I went, just carried on. But anyway, we're going off topic here. But yeah, I did carry on, Clive. Thanks. Anyway, good point.
Is there nothing about riding a big bike, Clive, that appeals to you?
I've created a list of things for and against, and as you can see, that's the for column.
Okay.
And that's the against column. So shall I take you through some of them? So number one on the against big bikes column is they make you look like you have a tiny penis.
So I'm going to counter that, right? So, I mean, I have got a tiny penis, but I just... So let's say, right, so I live on the beach, don't I? I live on the beach. And on a Sunday, all the little guys on their scooters, mods with loads of mirrors, they turn up. And I'm often having like breakfast with a family on the beach or something, like the cafe. And they all turn up, and there's a big crowd of them, and they attract some attention. So let's say there's a big group of these guys, and let's now substitute that with small bikes. So they're on small adventure bikes. The Tet has just turned up, the Tet lot. It's the lightweight adventurers and all their posse. They've turned up, and everyone's like, wow, look at these bikes. Aren't they cool? Look at these bikers. And then down the road, wham, me and Mav turn up, covered in mud. We just pull up, don't say a word, turn our bikes off. Where's the crowd going to go? They're going to go to the big bikes. All of them. They're all going to go to the big bike. And it's got nothing to do with penises. It's just because they're cool, Clive. They're cool, and people are like, wow, look at those guys covered in mud on their big bikes. Stick with me, Mav. Come on. Still on their big bikes.
Can I get back to my list now? Number 2 on the list is, and it actually came from something Dan and Ed said, that on their first trip through Africa, they were on the old Africa Twin. And their second trip, which was sort of Siberia to Magadan, they decided they wanted to take smaller bikes. And the reason they wanted to take smaller bikes was because in Africa, you'd get to something, somewhere, some road or lane or something that looked really quite interesting, but they didn't have the confidence and or the ability to explore that route.
Well, I also wanted to ask, Dan had a very interesting analogy that I'd not heard before, surprisingly, but he described big bikes as SUV equivalents.
That's the tractors, yeah.
I wondered what you thought about that.
To answer the first question, don't get me wrong. If I want to go somewhere crazy on my own, and I don't know what I'm going to find, the KTM 500 is a much more sensible option. And it means I'm going to be like, I don't really care where I'm going, because I can literally pick that bike up and get it out of any situation. I'm fairly strong, and I can't pick up a 200-kilo motorcycle. So there is an absolute logic if you could literally encounter anything. And to your earlier point, if we're honest, most people who buy an adventure bike aren't going to go and hit the hard trails. For them, ABR is an amazing experience to hit the track there of 20 kilometers of trail, to hit it multiple times. For some of them, that'll be their adventure for that year. And that's okay. But that is a large proportion. We have to remember that, I'm not trying to sound arrogant, but the kind of riding that we do, we're in a small part of the curve. A vast majority aren't doing the kind of riding we're doing. And there's nothing wrong with that. Adventure bikes make great touring bikes. And that is the reality of what most people are doing with it. And if they can then go hit the occasional trail, they're more likely to go do it, which is back to my earlier point. If I take a small bike, how much am I going to ride it for fun? To just go hit some roads.
Do you know, I hadn't even occurred to me that most people don't take these bikes off-road, because once I got back into biking again in adulthood, that was what I wanted to do. I remember I was on a stag do in Wales, and I saw these 6 guys appear from the middle of nowhere covered in mud on dirt bikes, and I'm thinking, that's what I want to do. So all my riding is pretty much focused around trail riding, getting off-road, in whatever guise that is.
The other way that I remember when I was learning and doing okay, I was saying, well, most of my riding is road riding. They said, yeah, but that's giving you really good bike control. Like if you are riding regularly, getting lots of seat time, even if it's not on trails, you are just getting better at the clutch. You are getting better familiar where the controls are. If you're not going to get that much seat time, you're only going to do 30 miles once a week, or you're going to do 400 commuter miles, that's going to give you more seat time and more ability to ride with the bike in general. And then when you want to get to do some trails.
I don't know if you guys follow the TET Facebook page, but there's regularly, several a week, pictures of people that have gone somewhere, followed the TET, got themselves into trouble, their bike's upside down in a ravine, and they're calling for help. That's not a positive look, is it?
It's not a positive look. When you think about the amount of people that are in that group now, and the amount of people that are riding it, it's still a pretty small proportion. It's once every 10 days, 2 weeks that someone's got stuck with a big bike and they've got Sonia Riga's writing checks your body can't cash, and they've got themselves in a situation they can't handle. Okay, sure. How many times has that happened on a small bike too?
I also think that people don't take pictures of small bikes upside down because it's not really that impressive. People take pictures of their big bikes on their side because it's impressive, if I can use that term. I know it enrages the tech community. Oh my God, there's a big bike on its side. But I just think
it's not that. It's any bike on its side enrages me.
Yeah.
I don't know why anyone would take a picture of their bike on the ground. It's very distressing for people like me. I hate to see it. I just think, pick it up.
That's because you never fall off, apart from that one time you fell off.
Yeah, it's an unusual sight. But, oh man alive. Would you take a picture of your bike if you'd just fallen off it on its side?
If it looked cool, yeah. Mav, you took a picture of me when I'd fallen off that time we went riding at Salisbury.
You take a picture of other people's bikes. If we go on our trips and there's 6 of us, you get 5 fucking pictures of your bike when you've fallen off.
But your own bike, just a solitary bike lying on the ground. Why the hell would you take a photograph of that?
I did because I was trying to do a stupid Instagram picture, and I was literally on my way to work, and I was just trying too hard to get the bike in a certain position, and it fell over. It was the GSA. On my own, on the slope, and you sort it out.
It's very distressing.
I don't think there's anything wrong with it.
Once it's down, the damage is done, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. I think it's because as a kid, whenever your bike sort of fell over, fuel would just go everywhere,
right?
And the oil would get into places it shouldn't get into, and it was just main thing. Massive priority was just to get it vertical again.
I have to get my KT up quite quickly because it's got two tanks obviously, and the little breathers, they become just hoses that just fire fuel if it's on its side. But going back to what you said about the tech, I have an issue with people having an issue that people are falling off their bikes on their adventures. If you want to go, like I make all this YouTube rubbish, don't I? And the only reason I make it is because I'm just making some stuff that hopefully motivates people to go riding. And I'm a big believer that your adventures are your adventures, aren't they? So if your adventures riding to Starbucks and getting a coffee, fine, you've had an adventure. If it's riding around the ABR, fine. I don't really get the beef. I just don't get it. I'm not having a whinge about it. I just don't understand people going, oh my God, I can't believe you took your bike there and fell off. Well, I did, mate. I don't know what your problem is.
And I think those people having that beef is a much bigger indicator of how small your penis is than the size of your dirt bike.
Than me and you turning up at the beach.
I think with the tech thing, it's more, I think people will probably get upset if they think that somebody's been inconvenienced by somebody's ill judgment at taking a certain bike down a certain track. Probably that, isn't it, I think?
But no one's ever been inconvenienced. Whenever I read those posts, and I very rarely do because they bore me, normally people come to help and it's all very positive and they make new friends and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Right.
So
it's people being enraged on somebody else's behalf.
So what's the rest on my list? They're too heavy.
This is a great list. Clive, is your real name the Trail and Adventure Motorbike Podcast?
They're not fun.
What?
They're not fun. Well, yeah, that's a valid one. Go on.
My point is, I had a 990 for a while as well. Unbelievably brilliant bike. And I did do some trail riding on it. And I liked it very much. But it was relatively new and shiny. And I just didn't enjoy it because I was too worried about damaging it potentially. And also, there is the potential, because they are so much heavier, that if you do fall off on them, you're going to hurt yourself more. And potentially, if you get trapped under a KTM, you can probably get it off you, whereas if you get trapped under a GS or a 990, you're going to struggle to shift it on your own. I did actually go one time, I was 2 up down the old coach road, and I got Rachel to jump off it while I rode it down the steep bit at the other end. For some reason, I waited for her a little bit further down, still on a bit of a slope, put the side stand down, and for some reason pulled the bloody clutch in as I was getting off. So it just fell on the ground like this, and it kind of went over at more than 180 degrees, and I couldn't lift it up on my own. But fortunately, there's a 4x4 coming the other way, and I just flagged them down and they helped me pick it up. But I just couldn't pick it up. We had camping gear and stuff on, so that probably didn't help. I don't find it as enjoyable. In fact, our mate Adam at the festival at the weekend said he went out for a ride on his big bike and found this new lane, and it seemed like a really good lane. But basically what he did, he went and got home, got his smaller bike, and went and rode on his smaller bike because it was more fun that way.
I don't know if you're defining fun the right way here. You're defining fun in, oh, could I pick my bike up if it fell over? Well, that's not the fun. The fun bit to me is the riding. If I fall off, fine, I'll deal with it. But I don't define my fun on, oh, I might fall off and get stuck. Otherwise you'd never leave your house, would you?
That's the thing. That it basically, to me, it was like, well, the risk of riding this bike means that there's stuff going on my head and I'm not enjoying it.
Yeah, I suppose.
Couple more points. You can't pick it up.
Yeah, you can.
Literally, once one's dropped, they're there for life. It's like an elephant on its back.
But that's where you're going wrong, Clark. See, if you took the picture yourself, the bike becomes lighter afterwards, and then you can pick it up.
Got it. Okay, they're expensive. They're far more expensive. Actually, they're not than EXCs, because EXCs are about 10 grand these days, aren't they?
An EXC is about the same price as a T7.
GS 1200s, well, all the GS ranges, they're a bargain these days. There's so many of them.
Yes.
They're really not, are they?
I've just bought one, and yes, they are a lot of money. But then it's like, I can then have an amazing ride to work and then hit some awesome trails.
So the manufacturers, and I'm thinking about Yamaha are using Poltares for their T7. KTM have got Chris Birch. Africa Twins, they did that massive trip through Iceland with loads of shit-hot rally and motocross riders. There seems to me that there is a certain amount of cynicism in those manufacturers for using those incredible riders to say to people, these bikes, this is what they can do. When the reality is they are in the top 1% of riders in the world. Nobody else can do what Poltares does on a T7. Nobody else can do what Chris Birch does on a 1290.
Even the CRF 250s, when they came out, they still got some rally riders and smashed them through the dunes. I mean, I'd argue that most...
I could have done that.
I thought you were being serious, and I was like, what?
For people listening in black and white, the commentator's shaking his head.
I remember when Chris Birch and the 1190 came out, and those videos were hugely inspiring. And with the HP2, there's a video there of the guys doing the prologue at Erzberg, and it sucked me into buying the bike. But isn't that just the inspiration? Is that not like there were loads of people that are all the same? Like, look at Megs Bratt and what she does on a 300. Most mortals can't do what she can do on a KTM 300. Does that mean that's cynical that they're semi-sponsoring her or whatever? No, that just means be inspired that this is doable. This bike can do it. Just like people who do buy a new Land Rover Defender should go take it down do some adventures with it.
Thinking one of the funny little limitations I found with having a slightly bigger bike when I've been on a trip is that it reduced the wild camping possibilities. There's often places where I just thought, well, yeah, if I had a lighter bike, I could have probably got down there without the worry of, can I get back out of there again in the morning? Has that ever happened to you?
I definitely had on the TET, on the Great Western Trail part, there was one trail that was just like baby head-sized rocks going down into it, and we were like, if it's like this the other side, as steep and trying to ride up this, and there was a group of us as well. There was a range of talents, and it was like, this would be sketchy, and made a point of walking all the way down to then check the other way out. But the other thing I would say though about the wild camping, that with a bigger bike, it's a little bit easier to take some comfortable luggage. You know, like try and take some reasonable amount of luggage on a little 300 isn't so great. Like if you want to actually take, because like there's wild camping, like I took a tent. But there's actually, if you're going to really wild camp, then you need a stove. You probably want a chair, maybe, because if you're going to actually enjoy the camping, all of a sudden you're carrying a bit of weight, and those little bikes aren't often built for it. Whereas we did 7 days and did have all the kit. Once you carry like a spare tube and a decent toolkit, if you're really going to go live off the bike for a few days, that kit is much easier carried on a bigger bike. So, sure, there are parts where you think, can I tuck this bike away down here? But I can carry more luggage more comfortably on a bigger bike, I think.
If people are going to go down the big bike route, what advice would you give them? For example, would you recommend a riding school to get some practice and tips from people that do know what they're doing? Or would you advise them actually start on a smaller bike and build up, maybe get something secondhand and cheap that you can, shift on in a couple of years' time for the same money that you paid for it?
I'm going to concede an element. Having a small bike has given me more confidence to do things like learning to, I still can't wheelie, but learn to get the front light, learn to jump, learn to slide the bike more. Learning that stuff on a big bike is non-trivial. And so I would say my learning did suffer a little bit by sticking only with a big bike, because trying to commit to doing those kind of things, especially riding on your own on a big bike, was hard. To your point about progression, I can't recommend training enough. In terms of, I spent a small fortune with the BMW school. They're amazing. Their bikes, they're always no more than a year old. They have no damage deposit. So they literally, if you do a level 1, the first thing they do is to say, drop it. So you get comfortable with, yep, this bike won't. Just for Noel, it will convince you that it's okay to drop the bike and it's okay to pick it up too. Getting good tuition, big shout out to the off-road skills, but also hook up with friends. That's where the social media is really good. Go riding with other people, and it's about saddle time. Like, one really good course is only going to get you X far. More and more saddle time will be huge.
Ollie, you got some advice other than watching your videos to see how it shouldn't be done?
I would advise people to watch my videos. Yeah, that's avoid my YouTube at all costs. I think it's an unfair question, buddy, because it depends on the person. So like I said, I started on a big bike, and I went and, the first trip I did on my big bike, I drilled the fuel cap out to put some fuel in it. So, I wasn't mucking around. But there's less risk with a small bike. They normally cost less money. Like you said, you're less likely to hurt yourself in a big way. You're still probably going to fall off a lot if you're practicing the skills Mav just talked about. But you could probably learn a bit of proper off-road in there. But it all depends on what the person wants to do. I'd say you just got to figure out what you're going to ride, as in like what sort of riding you're going to do. Because if you're going to buy how much is a brand new GS now, Mav, you'll know?
14 to 20 grand.
Yeah, if you're going to buy a 20 grand motorbike, but then you're just going to be petrified that you're going to get a little scratch on it, then I'd probably say don't buy a 20 grand motorbike. Whereas I ride a big 990 and I'm not afraid to try hard trails and throw it down the trail by accident if I fall off, because I'll just fix it afterwards. But you just need to figure out what you want to do, because what you don't want to do is give people advice. Say, go and get a big bike, and then they scratch it, and then they're upset, and then they never want to ride on the trail ever again, because you're just going to put them off, aren't you?
No, what would you advise people to do? Bearing in mind your advice is always fairly kooky.
Well, I mean, people always say about the trial bike thing, don't they? That, that's great.
Trials bikes. I was going to say that as well. I'll let you say it first, though.
Trials bikes are the purest of all motorcycles, I always think. But no, it's a great thing to start off on, is a trials bike. But I would go for the building up thing. But I think it's all about getting experience on lighter bikes. But in the end, it's having both. I mean, we've all kind of got both, haven't we? All of us have kind of got both. I think that's the way to go. I'm a terrible person to have in on this conversation, because I do still really like the idea of having a big bike. I'm always shopping around for big bikes.
Well, I've got one as well. That's fine.
I don't think there isn't a good argument against them. But it's all about ability, isn't it? It's what we keep coming back to. It's what sort of riding you want to do and where you're going to go and how good you are and how capable are you. So I would just say build up to it if you want to get to that. I still feel like I'm kind of building up to it. I'll be shopping later on for a big bike. And I've mentioned it before, but second-hand GSs now, I think, are an absolute bargain.
What are they going for?
Well, you can get second-hand GS Adventures now for a sub 5K, which is incredible. That was always completely out of reach for a lot of people, a 500 Adventure. And now there's loads of them around. This is part of, they've made so many of the bloody things that the value was always going to drop eventually. And that's starting to happen now.
I took mine to 130,000 miles. Trying to do that on a small bike.
I'm just intrigued to get one, because we've got a friend who's got one, Andy.
He loves
and he always talks about the character.
And luggage, John.
And they always talk about the character of the engine on the Boxer engines. So I'm really curious about that, because I've moved one out of a garage, and that's about it. So I'd love to get my hands on one for a while.
Is it a draw then?
But what's your answer, Clive?
What's my answer? Well, I've got both as well. And it's kind of horses for courses, really. If I was advising a new rider, I would advise them not to go anywhere near a big bike to start off with. Do you know what? I had a trials bike. I only had it for about a year, and I think that was the thing that improved my riding the most, because you get the clutch control, you get the throttle control, you learn what bikes can actually do. So when you're riding at a 2-foot rock step up on Gatesgarth, which you guys will be doing fairly soon on your ludicrous bikes, you learn that just a little bit of push down, bounce back up, bit of throttle, and you just roll over that 2-foot rock step up on a small bike. My advice to people is think about your off-road experience, get some practice, maybe go and sign up to the BMW, go and ride with Steph in Wales, try something first, realise how difficult or how different off-road riding actually is. So you've got a GSX 1000 in the garage, you've been riding for 20 years. If you've never been off-road, it's a completely different activity. So go and try something first. Don't try and run before you can walk. My advice would be definitely start off on a smaller bike and build up to it if you want to go big.
But that's for, just to add on the end, but that's for hardcore trails, though, isn't it? If you're going to go on adventures where you're going to do touring and stuff, then my advice would be completely opposite.
Yeah.
And I think that exactly to the point you made earlier, Ollie, that it's so much about that individual and their context. I love the idea of a trials bike, and I've had some great riding of trials bikes with Vanessa and Alex, and they are mega. And I've even got multiple bikes, but I just can't justify another bike that's not going to get enough use to then go do that riding, even though I know that kind of riding is mega for your skills development.
I've got quite a few bikes in the garage. Sometimes I sort of daydream about how great it would be to just have one bike. If I just had to have one bike, it would either be a trials bike or something like the biggest bike I could find. Yeah, it would be at either end of the scale. It'd be nothing in the middle, probably. It'd be biggest or smallest.
I was going to say, so Clive, imagine you live 20 miles from the nearest trail. Would your one bike, if you can only have one bike, still be a small trail bike?
Yes, or possibly a 690.
No.
If 690s didn't cost half as much again.
And I think that's part of the point, that you are blessed to live in an amazing part of the world for trail riding. And for that, I could totally get it. And I think Ollie probably even too would be like, yep, I'd totally keep the 350 because I'd use it and it would be in its element.
It's interesting what you say, actually, because the guys in Scandinavia, we spoke to Thomas Hansen and we spoke to Robert Nomad, and they all ride bigger bikes because basically they've just got gravel tracks in Sweden. Boils down to, doesn't it really, is where you live and what you ride and what you're going to do. All right, we'll agree to a draw until you come up and ride your stupid big bikes in the lakes.
I don't see how it's a draw.
A draw.
What version of maths is
How are
this?
you making this a draw? 3 of us said big bikes and you were on the fence.
I have godlike editing powers. I decide who wins. All your good points gone. I didn't really edit their stuff out. That was a very enjoyable podcast to record. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope there's some useful stuff in there for you, although not particularly conclusive. I think what you need to do is basically try and ride the bike that you're thinking of getting, and if you are going off-road, try and ride that bike off-road as well. Go to one of the training centres that are littered around Wales and elsewhere. There's plenty of them. There's the BMW school. There's Moto junkies. There's the Mick Exton's place. There's plenty of them out there. But do know, whichever bike you're going to get, if you're taking it off-road, you're going to drop it. Try not to be too precious. Maybe even think about second-hand initially. Massive thank you to Ollie and Mav. If you haven't seen Ollie's videos, you really should check him out on YouTube. And also, Mav does some amazing photography under the name HP2MAV on Instagram. Go and have a look at his pictures. Right, see you next time. Thanks for listening. We really appreciate your support. Don't forget you can follow us on Facebook and Instagram. And if you really appreciate what we do, you could consider supporting us on Patreon or buy us a coffee. Links are available on our website, which is tampodcast.com, tampodcast.com, where we also have a limited selection of branded stuff. But either way, please keep listening and spreading the word. See you next time.